Hi everyone, this video is for property investors. It's going to be an 8-part series where I go through every investment property that I purchased. I'm going to show you the property, I'm going to talk about when we bought it, the sequence, what was going through my mind, what the data is on the property, why I bought it, and then just give you a good guideline on the overall strategy. And then on each video I'll go through the data, break it down for you, and then move on to the next video. I hope this will give you a whole lot of value. My name is Adrian. I'm a mortgage broker based up in Brisbane. I have moved here recently, but I will be going back to Sydney most likely in the next 6 to 12 months. So this was the first property that I purchased. I'm not going to give away the address, but it is a clear picture. Now, my first investment buy was in the end of 2020. Okay, this property was purchased in the range of 440. They listed it originally on the market for anything around the 410 to 420 mark, and this is the only investment property that I bought that was not using a buyer's agent. Every other of my 8 investment properties that I've bought had a buyer's agent that transacted on it for me. Now, at this stage, I'll be completely honest, I was not a property investor. The goal was to buy this property, be close to family, and move out of the south of Sydney and the Sutherland Shire, out of a unit, so we could get into a house while I ran my mortgage broking company from home. Okay, the property was bought on the outskirts of Newcastle in the Maitland area, and the purchase price was $440. Now, there was quite a few issues with the agent not being straight up and being a little bit deceitful in the transaction. But at the end of the day, we managed to buy it, and from what I can say with the negotiation and what I had to get through to get to this property, it was very stressful, and with the amount of work that I was doing on the self-employed side under the mortgage broking business, this was just a time sink that I couldn't replicate. We put a 20% deposit down on this, and it was listed as owner-occupied property initially, and we were running it as variable on principal and interest. Okay, you can see that the property is brick. The main reasons why we picked this property, let's talk about it. So it's 3-bed, 1 bath, 2 car. We liked the fact that it was brick. It was quite new inside, and when we looked at the floor plan, there was a potential to put an extension on it at a later date if it was an owner-occupier. And we also really liked that there was a driveway down the whole right side of the property with a really large carport and a huge double garage at the back, and the square meterage was something around 730 square meters. Now, we weren't looking at this from an investment lens, but now we are. Okay, when our first goal was to rent out the property for 12 months and then move up, and then something happened with family where we didn't want to live close to family anymore. We won't mention what happened, and the rent on the first 12 months was somewhere around the 440 mark, so very close to 5.5% gross rental yield. And then what we noticed was in that first 12 months, while we were working to make our way up there, the property went through the roof. So we probably went from 440 to at least 610 inside of about 10 months. The Newcastle market surged, and then in that 12 months we kind of had the falling out with a few family members, and then Maria and I decided that the business was going well, that we weren't going to move up there, we were actually going to rent vest in South Sydney, and that from there on we were going to continue buying investment properties. Now, if we look at the 8 investment properties that we bought, the majority of them were around the 400k mark, give or take. We do have 2 cheap units that we bought, but that's it. Some were slightly over 400, some were slightly under 400. The rents on this went from 440 to 490 to 510, which is the current rent on it at the moment. And we also like the fact that because the block size, it actually backs onto the back of government land. And with this one, there's actually no granny flats on the back of these properties in the street. But when we checked for council, we originally bought this property thinking that we couldn't get a granny flat on it. But then about 12 to 18 months in, we actually found out that we could get a granny flat on it. Okay, and we've got the building contracts and the plans now. And it looks like we're going to be doing something like 480 rent on the main property and about 400 rent on a 2-bedder, 1-bath, 1-car granny flat at the back, and it looks like it'll rent out at about 400. So the total rent that we'll be getting is somewhere around the 880 mark per week, which is a great rental yield when you're considering that we purchased a property for 440. Let's say you've got about a 190 granny flat, 2-bed, 1-bath, 1-car, and you're sitting at a rental yield of about 880 per week, and you're putting a 20% deposit down. You've got a 440, and 20% of that, you're looking at somewhere in the mid to low 300s, around that 330, 340 mark. And then you put 20% on top of the granny flat at about 190. Okay, you're looking at somewhere around 165, 170 after you put the 20% down. So you're looking at anywhere around, say, the 600 mark that you're totally capitalised at, and you've got a property that's renting out at 880. So you're sitting at 7.5%, 8% gross yield in a market that's very close to the Newcastle market. So in those kind of yields, you can't lose. Some people don't like positively geared properties. They like negatively geared properties where they lose on a per year basis. They're in the top tax bracket, and then they claim half of the loss back on their tax return. For me, I'm all about positive properties and making sure that the rental return is high and that we can have a value add on top of the property, and that we can go ahead and continue rolling that into the next deal. Because from my point of view, I'm going for income replacement, and I want the biggest asset base as possible, and I want a portfolio that even if I take on a lot of debt, that is very resilient and I can use to pay off that debt or live on that as well. All right, so in this particular buy, it was actually interesting because a lot of people say that you can't make money in high crime areas or areas that have a lot of housing commission, and this just isn't the case. So if we look at the example of this suburb, if you knew the suburb that we were talking about, half of the suburb is housing commission. And you do not want to be walking around in those areas and or to the station around that. So what we did was we purchased in the same suburb, but we purchased the furthest away from the train and the shops. And then while we do that, the housing commission is kind of in the centre between that and the station and the shops, and no one else has a reason to walk up to our street. So we noticed that our street was actually priced higher than the majority of the other streets. It was much safer, less of the housing commission people came down to that area, and overall it was much safer. The houses were nicer and the streets were a lot better. So we did like that. And to say that you can't make money in housing commission areas, people just don't really know anything. So I'll give you two other examples. I followed the Wollongong market very closely, and areas like Corrimal and Bellambi has a lot of housing commission, and anyone that knows what those two suburbs have done compared to the suburbs around it are absolutely insane, because people avoided those suburbs up to a point where the price disparity was so large that everyone just loaded into those two suburbs, and you ended up getting 300 to 500 grand more on your money long term than if you bought in the suburbs around Corrimal and Bellambi. So I actually think that if you're strategic and you're buying in high crime areas, you can actually make a whole lot of money. All right, so that was that was what was going through our head when we bought this one. Now it's purely investment. We're just about to put the granny flats on. So out of the 8 investment properties, I've got 5 of them that I can put granny flats on. The 6th one is a dual key property, and then the 7th and the 8th, two better cheap units that are on high yield. So anyone that we can put a granny flat on, we are going to, and we're just doing that over the next 3 to 5 weeks. We're arranging that with the lenders now that we've adjusted everything as far as our lending goes. All right, so this is just a good idea and a starter. Now, when we look at this and how it fits into the total portfolio, I've done a 20% deposit because we were forced to do that. And then we've done, out of the 8 investment properties, we've done 4 equity taps up to 80%. So this was the property that actually went up the second most out of the whole portfolio. And the 4th one, which I bought, which was a dual key property, went up the most. So without these 2 properties going up so much, out of the 8 investment properties, I would have had to have funded a lot more deposits and I would have gone a lot slower. All right, so just bear in mind on the timing of that. So this buy was the end of December of 2020, and then there was almost like a at least 8 to 10 month gap where we were going to move up, and then we found out how much money we made on this one, and then just chose to start buying investment properties. And then from investment property 2 to 8, we pretty much did that inside of like an 8 to 10 month period. So if you count up all the 8 investment properties, we bought them inside of probably 18 to 20 months total. So hopefully this just gives you a good guide on what we were thinking, how we were thinking it. There was one other hiccup that came up with this property where where there was a known issue where on the plans the carport was not compliant with council. It was put up without council approval. But since we were notified of that issue during the sales process, we had a couple of options where we could have gone back to them and asked them to tear it down, or we could actually go through the steps of taking it on, but then it's a liability on us. So we chose to take the third option, which is to take out title insurance. So it's something that's a known issue that wasn't created by us, but it is notified during a buy or a sell process. And because we were notified of it, we ended up paying, I think, $500 to $600 for title insurance. And it essentially covers us in any event that carport causes a problem in any way. It could cause a problem for structural integrity. It could cause a problem with falling. It could, in a storm, there could be an issue. If council came around to do stuff with the granny flat and they noticed the carport, and then suddenly we've got costs associated with getting it checked or pulled down or remedied, we're essentially insured for that up to I think it was like 6 to 10 grand in total. So we're very much knowing about it. We rather take the title insurance out, and it didn't cost anything too much, and it is added to the cost basis of the property. So if we ever did sell, as far as an accountant's concerned, it gets taken into account for the CGT. Very similar to how a buyer's agent fee works, where you can't claim it up front, even though some people try and do that regarding education costs. Okay, but really it doesn't. But on the back end, it is a cost associated with buying the property, which can be accounted for with the CGT, subject to you speaking to your accountant. All right, so hopefully this is a good one, a good example of how we started out. We didn't start out on the investment process, but then after realizing what we were actually going to do, it ended up turning into a very good investment property, and it did tick a lot of the boxes that ended up being our long-term strategy. Okay, so yeah, that's what we did. We did all 8 investment properties with the same lender. Okay, we did it all under personal names, and then just went boom, 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 boom. Then got to our borrowing capacity limit, especially with the interest rate rises that have happened, and then had to restructure a lot of things to get myself in a position to buy unlimited after that. So we started using more complex structures with an accountant going forward. Okay, so yeah, this is just the start of the process and what we went through. If you've got any questions or you like this type of content, please hit that like button. Send me a comment, and yeah, what my hope is that you go through this whole series. You watch it all, it adds a lot of value to you. And then, you know, if your goal is income replacement through a very similar strategy, then you book an appointment in with me. We go ahead and set it all up. And then once we've set it all up, you know, you have access to all my resources and my experience to get you the same kind of, you know, end goal that I've already gotten to using the same kind of processes. All right, so this is giving a lot of my personal information up front. Please respect that, and I hope that I'm adding a lot of value to you and I'm being raw and real as possible as I go through this. All right, I will see you on the next video. All right, then, bye.